Right, joining us for this session today. This is going to be a really interesting one. We're really looking at the first national climate risk assessment through the lens of the role of innovation, and where it fits. I'm joined by uh, three fabulous panelists this morning. We've got Emma Coath, who is the executive chair of Rocket Seeder, and Rocket Seeder is a accelerator and innovation hub around agri-food. So a really important, I guess, area that's going to be affected by climate adaptation, and very pleased to have her with us. My second speaker is Caitlin Tazula, who is the general manager of Boomerang Labs. And Boomerang Labs is all about circular economy and the shift from a linear economy to that circularity in business. And then our final guest is Stephen from Climate Kick. And Climate Kick do a lot of work and advisory around climate and adaptation. So three really good speakers today. And I'm going to quickly try and run through a little bit of an oversight of the report and then guide a conversation. And there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. And I know a lot of you who have actually put questions in advance. I do want to make clear that this is, it's impossible to get a panel of people who are absolute experts on every element of such a wide-reaching report. So just be mindful of limitations, and that can't go into extreme detail on every aspect of things. Before we begin, I always like to acknowledge the MAB. I know Stephen's up in, what country are you in, Katie?
Sorry, Piers, I think you jumped around then. I'm in Wonnarua country, though, if that was the
Wanneroo.
question.
Excellent. And I'm in Gadigal country in Sydney. So with no more ado, I am going to just very quickly try and touch on some of the big themes that came through in this report for those who have not had the time to read 260 pages. So the report was really about the first time we've looked at the climate-related threats in a holistic way, the people, the places, the industries, and the ecosystems that will be impacted. The report was developed by the Australian Climate Service, but they worked very closely with the Bureau of Meteorology, CSIRO, ABS, and Geoscience Australia. The key findings are there's going to be a lot of change to the nature of hazards in Australia. We're going to see more extreme heat, bushfires, drought, cyclones. We're looking at roughly a half a metre of sea level rise by 2100, which will, of course, threaten millions of coastal homes. Australians like clinging to the coast. And more compounded and cascading disasters like floods, fires, and heat waves. The report also looks into the people and particularly vulnerable communities such as First Nations, older Australians, low-income households, and looking at the consequences of increased heat-related illnesses, air quality issues that will continue to worsen, and the impact on regional and outer suburban communities as the risk is increased due to poor infrastructure and supply chains. In terms of economic and industry, There's going to be big changes to the agricultural yields and changes in food security. Again, drought and extreme heat playing a big part in that. Also, in terms of economic and industry, we can look forward to surging insurance costs and just the simple risk of underinsurance across our country. We can look at the disaster recovery expenditure increasing by 5 to 7 times over the course of this century. In scary numbers, heat distress may cost the economy somewhere around $423 billion by 2063. That puts some submarines into context. In terms of implications for ecosystem and biodiversity, we're already very well aware of the impacts on the coral reefs, but we can also see these impacts flowing through into our eucalypt woodlands, threatening a lot of our inland rivers that we depend on. And from that will obviously follow loss of species, ecosystem functions, with impacts on air, water, food, and well-being. The fifth area that the report talks about is the impact on infrastructure and supply chain. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure and networks in energy, transportation, telcos, and they're all vulnerable to extreme events. So we can expect further disruptions will cascade through logistics, trade, and essential services. The sixth area is around defence and national security, seeing multiple simultaneous disasters, and that's going to increase demand for Australian military for domestic disaster support and regional instability for climate migration and resource stress. In short, there's 4 areas for particular action that we need to be looking at: strengthening local and regional adaptation capacity. We need to be, and this is about today, investing in innovation and climate resilience infrastructure. The third point, integrating data, policy, and industry partnerships for risk-informed decision-making. And finally, empowering entrepreneurs, communities, and traditional owners to co-design solutions. So in short, Australia's climate risks are escalating faster than our current adaptation capacity, and innovation, collaboration, long-term investments are essential to safeguard communities, industry, and ecosystems. That was a pretty fast overview, but hopefully you get the sense from that there's a lot of change coming, and whether we manage to address climate change, a lot of these impacts are already starting to flow through and will continue to do so. It's worth noting that the report models on a 1.5 degree increase, a 2 degree increase, and a 3 degree increase in its assumptions. So with that said, I'd love to kick off the conversation and have a talk about the role of innovation as adaptation infrastructure. So the report calls for ongoing monitoring, innovation, and risk-based assessments to inform adaptation. I'm going to open and say, how can innovation ecosystems like accelerators and challenge programs and venture fund act as national adaptation infrastructure, helping deliver practical responses to climate risk? I might start with Katie on that one. Katie, what's your feeling? How do we fit?
I think I think there's a lot of different directions that we can go go about this, and a lot of different roles accelerators can play. I mean, one initial thought is the fact that we need a few different approaches to this. This is such a huge problem that we're addressing, and as we're seeing in the report, nobody is spared, no part of the ecosystem is spared. Everyone around Australia will be affected by this, and therefore we need innovations that are going to suit different locations, different experiences, different environments too. So I think having accelerators that are uh, prioritizing some of the themes related to climate adaptation are really important. A little bit biased looking at the three innovation support organizations that we have on the call today, but I think it's really about looking at not innovation for innovation's sake, but looking at innovation that is actually addressing not just a problem we're seeing now, but a problem that we're going to see in the next 25 years. I would like to think that this report is really showcasing the urgency of this and is a bit of a wake-up call for some, that for so long we've talked about climate adaptation and the need for it as something to protect our grandchildren or our future generations. But what we're seeing is that it's within our lifetime, within many of us, our working lifetime, not even just when we're in a retirement home, and just waiting around and, playing bowls and things and not worrying about the future. This is what we're going to experience, and we need to address it. So I think, as I said, prioritizing acceleration and support for startups that directly relate to strengthening infrastructure, regeneration, climate, I mean, um, removal or capture or these sorts of technologies too. I think it's really about, yeah, looking at what innovation is coming up, and that's great that we're seeing it all over the industries and all across the economy. But I think extra emphasis should be given to those that directly relate to these problems that need to be addressed first.
Mm. And Emma, I mean, there's so many different areas that this is going to impact in terms of food systems and social structures and all that gear. How can we do a better job as an innovation sector on coordinating what is a big shared problem, but is then needing to be addressed in all these different ways, in all these different geographies and industries? Do you see a coordination opportunity or challenge here?
Yeah, well, I guess we've got the Feeding Australia strategy at the moment, which is in train, the federal government strategy. So that's an effort to, I guess, understand um, collectively, what the potential impacts are and how we need to adapt to that. So that does have a focus on food security, including infrastructure. So that's, I guess, something that's in train, but we can't rely on government to I guess solve all our problems and fund everything. So that's why, it's great that there's, programs and organizations like Rocket Seeder that focus specifically on the food and agriculture sector and helping to, I guess, support solutions that, innovations, technologies that can solve some of these problems. And, obviously we have, organisations like CSIRO and, state governments and universities. There's a whole lot of wonderful research that goes on in Australia. Probably needs to be translated and some of it commercialised. So we need to get better at that. So we're ready for when all of these impacts, happen. I mean, obviously they're already happening and they have been for a long time. It's no news to any, climate scientist or farmer in Australia that things are changing and sometimes they've had like a fire one day to deal with and a flood the next day. It's just getting ridiculous. So I think it's sort of really about the onus is on us, on communities, working together and, sharing, I guess, best practice across regions and across Australia. And yeah, I think going back to accelerators, you know, we do innovation does play a really important role in that, and also, you know, trying new things. You need people in the ecosystem that have, I guess, you know, a higher risk appetite. So whether that's investors or, you know, innovators, entrepreneurs, innovative researchers. Otherwise, you know, things just take too long. We haven't got time. Is really the main thing here.
Yes. And Jason, from a data point of view, how do we track, how can we as a nation look at the innovation that we're all individually working on and put that into a coherent sort of strategy and track our progress? Do you have a sense of how innovation can be coordinated?
Thanks, Piers. I think great question. And I might start by saying I think this report came at a fantastic time, and you know, it's certainly an eye opener for all of us, and it's bringing attention to some of these burning challenges that we have. And I think that actually important just to point out that the role of government and reports like this are really important for directing innovation and providing that leadership and pointing people in where they should be focusing. I think the way we look at the climate challenge is it is actually a challenge, or it's a coordination and collaboration challenge, that these challenges cut across, you know, organizations, places, and what is really a useful way to look at it is that it's, you know, these are system challenges, and what we really need to do is change our system and our ways of working. And it's not one organization, it's not one government, it's, you know, all different tiers of government, companies that produce things, the way we behave and use things, etc. So I think, yeah, thinking about it from a systems innovation perspective, and thinking about it as a systems challenge, and there's, you know, technological challenges, there's policy challenges, there's market challenges. And so I think if it comes to tracking it and kind of innovation data, it's like if you're thinking about the multiple dimensions of this challenge, what are we doing across all of them, and how are we doing when it comes to coordination, collaboration to address these climate challenges?
No, thank you. Katie, I mean, you deal day to day with a lot of entrepreneurs, as do I. Um, I guess over the last 10 years, we've seen real collaboration around reducing greenhouse gases. And that's something that I think we've seen entrepreneurs front up and try to address through mobility, energy, agriculture, and all this stuff. This feels like a parallel issue, which is not about stopping climate change. You know, that we're doing our best, and it's not anywhere near enough. And hence we now need to deal with the consequences. Are you seeing entrepreneurs who are as interested in adaptation as they are in preventing or slowing climate change, or is this an area yet to be built out in the innovation space?
Think it's a really good question. I think we are seeing ongoing, say, mitigation related startups. However, I think there's a level of acceptance that there's no going from here, or it's going to be very hard to reverse the effects already seen. You know, we're already looking at a 1.2 degree increase as we're standing right now. We're on track for 2.9. I think a lot of the startups who we're working with recognize that we're on this path and we need to look forward from it. I think that this, you know, Jason put it really well, that this report is a great document produced by government to really direct where innovation needs to go. And I think it's the closest that we can get to having a crystal ball to see what environment we're going to be looking at obviously these are predictions or forecasts. These aren't necessarily exact stats of what we will see in the future. We don't know what's going to happen depending on how we continue to make changes and to innovate. But I think a lot of startups are looking in that adaptation phase. Collaboration, as you said, is really important for this. I think working in the circular economy space, we're seeing lots of this irrespective of the climate conversation, to be honest. I think that it's quite inherent in startups looking at circular economy, looking at systems transition, how we can transform supply chains, how we can look at every time we touch a material or to use a resource, how we can use it better. So I think the collaboration piece is inherent in so many circular economy entrepreneurs. And so if anything, these sorts of documents, really just come to support what's already happening and add fuel to that fire.
Another area that this report really highlights that I think is an interesting one for innovation is that a lot of the regional and systemic issues reported on the ground. And I'm talking about the north half of Australia and those sort of regional communities that are not necessarily set up with accelerators and innovation hubs. And yet so much of that infrastructure is in the south of the country, in the coastal areas. It feels like we need to build some really good bridges to be able to get that knowledge and that capacity in the places that are affected. So can maybe I'll throw this to Emma. How can we build those bridges and actually get the innovation where it needs to be and out of Ultimo and Fortitude Valley and up into far north Queensland and the Northern Territory and West Australia?
Yeah, look, I think it's obviously, thank you to COVID. We've got COVID to thank for at least one thing. And that's allowing us to be, all sort of online and used to being online and learning online. I mean, Rocket Seed sort of got really good delivering programs online, and we're not the only ones all over the world. We did so, and we found it, really effective, because the good thing about online programs is that you can bring in sort of international speakers and so forth, experts that you couldn't do if you were having a program in the Melbourne CBD or something like that. So I don't see being sort of, as long as your internet connection is good, and it's, probably better than yours, Piers, today in lots of places in regional and rural areas. So I think there's no barrier to learning, if you like, and learning from others if you are remote. I think people are pretty used to that now. So yeah, I don't see that as an issue, and also I find too that there are so many organisations across Australia that deliver programs in regional and remote areas. It's just quite sort of mind-blowing, the number of not-for-profits and so forth across Australia that cover these regions, and there's quite a lot of funding going into those organisations. So it's just a matter of directing it and sort of or influencing the direction of that funding, so it goes into programs like ours that provide support for innovation and so it gets to, often it's good when it's developed in it sort of by someone in a regional rural area, because they understand their needs better than someone you know, sitting at a desk in Sydney or Melbourne. So we need programs that support those people, and it can be done.
And bring together all these different stakeholders. I think involving First Nation voices and experiences are going to be really important. Facilitate those conversations is, I think, going to impact how quickly and effectively we can respond. Katie, do you have any views on how we can be doing their place and issue-based innovation collectively?
How we can do issue and place-based innovation support. Sorry, you just cut out. Could you
I'm sorry, I
clarify?
have no idea why my internet is so shocking today. It was bad yesterday, and it must be something. I do apologize to everyone. I'm wondering about just the multiple stakeholders and coming up with new programs that are looking at adaptation and bringing in groups like First Nations. Do you see that that's going to be iterative or whole new ways of doing this over the next decade?
I think it's a good question. I think these conversations need to continue on, and they, in a way, need to be iterative. I think that also this is being done well in some areas. It's a big country. There's definitely places where this is being done properly, and it's about sharing that best practice. And I think what Emma touched on too about that communication between the metro and the regional areas, seeing regional areas not just as the destination for the innovation to be deployed, but also the destination where the answers are as well, and the insights that can't be achieved in the metropolitan areas. And that's fine, because that works both ways. As we're seeing in this report, there's plenty of problems happening, or risks and threats are going to be affecting the major cities as well. I think that, like I said, I think this is being done well in some places, and it's looking at what is making those areas work well, and including the all stakeholders in the conversation from start to end, rather than necessarily creating a solution and taking it and then having a brief consultation around that perhaps doesn't give the insight that it needs. Jason, I see you're off mute. Did you have anything to add to that question too? I didn't want to skip.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think both, what you and Emma have been saying is really important, and that national organizations can support what's happening in the regions. I guess what I was also thinking about is the importance of connecting regional organizations with each other for learning between different places, between different cities or different regions. For example, we are setting up something called the Industrial Regions Network together with CSIRO, which is about connecting regions like Gladstone and the Pilbara and Mount Isa and the Hunter Valley to share their learnings and challenges and opportunities with the transition to net zero, in particular, in this case, decarbonisation of heavy industry and use of large-scale renewables. But I think this type of initiative can be really important for these, Northern Australia communities when it comes to adaptation as well. People often, I think, like Emma said, there are people doing excellent things all across the country, but often people feel quite alone. So giving them some type of infrastructure to be sharing with their peers in other locations can create that community where they can kind of accelerate their action.
Yeah. No, thank you. I might stick with you for a second, Jason. We can come up with all these great new ideas for being more resilient and better responding, but we need, obviously, as Emma said, this can't all be from government. Are there tricks for getting the communities to buy in, to getting industry to buy in and actually participate and take ownership of this, as opposed to just the government issuing targets and reports?
Oh, that's
It's
a
an easy one.
that's a great question. I think they are in their own way, and you see, for example, industry and particularly the large players are feeling the pressure, and maybe it's going up and down, but from their shareholders and stakeholders to take action, and from investors to move. Um, I guess the pace of their action is often kind of driven by pressure from government. I think for communities, they are driven by you know, the floods and the fires and things that they experience. I think, though, again, there is a really important role for government to be investing in that infrastructure, because it's really difficult for community groups to do these things off their own back without any kind of funding to fund their own time. Most people have their own jobs or other, things that they're doing their 9 to 5, so it's often outside of their regular work. So I think government has a really important role to enable and facilitate greater coordination and collaboration between these groups. So I don't think government can take a kind of hands-off approach, but they need to be, judicious about the money that they're using to really kind of find where they can catalyze greater investment of, money or time from people in these communities and from industry.
It also feels like the insurance industry is quietly backing out of the room on the trickier issues, and therefore transferring kind of responsibility for managing these things back to asset owners. That feels like it's going to be another catalyzing thing. Like if you can't insure your home, then a community is going to think a lot more about disaster management themselves, and that feels like it would be another accelerator for that. Where do we think insurance is going to fit into this in the future as adaptation becomes uninsurable? Emma, do you have any views of that as a catalyzer and the role of insurance?
Yeah, look, I'm not an expert, but I have been hearing a lot lately that there already is infrastructure that can't be insured, and people are saying, that nothing will be insurable in the future. So that's really concerning, particularly for food producers, and because we all have to eat, we'll die if we won't eat, and we can't, certainly myself, I can't be, we can't be producing our own food and going back, several hundred years. So we really need to, I think that there is a role of government, a really important role of government to be thinking about this. So how we're going to, continue to produce food when it's in the light of, I guess, more frequent events like fire, flood, drought, and just how we're going to do this. It's a real concern to me. Again, I said I'm not an expert, and
Yeah.
I'm sure lots of this is a big discussion in the insurance, and perhaps should be a bigger discussion in the agriculture sector.
Yes, some industries are slow to change, as we've seen with the energy industry in particular is a big hard thing to turn around. Is agriculture the same? Is this a 50-year process, or is this something that we can start very quickly and start to have an impact on?
Oh,
Emma?
I think, there's no, we can't wait. We're sort of, it's pretty horrible situation. I used to work for the Victorian government, Agriculture Victoria, and a big part of their role is, the response, with events, and it's and dealing with you know, dead cattle and all of that sort of stuff. So that's obviously, you know, condensing and it's pretty full on what they have to deal with. It's really confronting. And I know I'm just watching the chat, you know, people are sort of talking about the mental health effect, you know, all of these you know, events. And yeah, I think you know, there's a lot of people. It's not that we're not doing anything about it yet. Of course we are, but it just doesn't seem like it's enough, which I guess that's one reason why this report came out, you know, to provide us with information and food for thought, you know, excuse the pun, for the, you know, food supply, the food industry and the agriculture industry. It's really important to sort of get the facts on the table and the evidence, rather than, you know, let the media or people that sort of aren't well informed to sort of hype things up, because when that happens, people just get confused and switched off. So it's so important to have that, you know, good evidence. And we, you know, really fantastic that this piece of work and this organisation exists, and all the organisations are working together to do that, because that's exactly what we need to keep it at the forefront of people's minds, so we don't give up. So we're always, you know, we're not forgetting about it and thinking, you know, mañana. We'll deal with that in 10 years, which is sort of the tendency that we have had with some things in Australia. But yeah, clearly we can't afford to do this. And it's about empathy, really, you know, empathy for our farmers, our food producers, and obviously, you know, the bulk of the Australian population is in major cities, and we just need to have more empathy and understand what our, you know, regional and rural communities are going through, because you know, really they're at the coalface, and we'd you know, we wouldn't be alive without them. So we need to support them.
Yeah. I'm thinking here just around, I guess climate change has been obviously seen as a global challenge, something we're all in together. And we've tried to appeal for global coordination around that. Adaptation feels much, much more local, and in a world where I guess we're having the global coordination challenged and we're becoming a little bit more parochial about our own issues. Is this a chance for Australia to kind of build its own infrastructure in response to this, but also make us more resilient against the decline of globalization? It's a tricky question, so I'm going to flick it straight to Jason. And let's thought I'd give you two pearlers back to back.
Yeah. I think we are, to a large extent, on our own when it comes to managing the impacts of climate change. I don't think we can rely on others to come and save us. I mean, I think I guess I've been thinking about this on a few different levels, and I think that place-based and city region perspective is absolutely you know, front and center when it comes to managing, you know, the impacts of climate change. And so I think that's where we need to be investing and putting our attention and strengthening and building connections and building that infrastructure that will support coordination and collaboration and innovation. So I think I guess that was what I was thinking of when you asked that question. I think there's you were talking about insurers, and I think that, you know, that's a really important and central piece, but I think it's also important to see that in the context of all of the other things going on as well, and our investments in, if we're thinking about insuring for fire, it's also about how we prepare for fire and how we can catalyze private investment to protect against the impacts of fire events and things like that. So taking that holistic perspective, and that place-based perspective, and then what at the national level we can do to kind of support these place-based initiatives.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting and challenging time, I think, over the next few decades. Katie, as we're facing these growing challenges, there's a lot of thinking about changing systems, and circular economy, I guess, is a very good example of how that rethinking how we do things is rising up. Do you see, to move out of gloom and doom, are there opportunities for circular solutions to arise through this sort of adaptation?
Yeah, I think if I said anything but yes, you might fire me. I think that would be going against the remit of my job if I said it wasn't. But to be honest, I think circular economy perhaps plays a larger role than it's given the space for in that report, in all 270 odd pages of it. Circular economy is mentioned once. It is mentioned specifically looking at built environment and infrastructure, which I think in itself is a huge opportunity. Like all of the other key themes of the report, infrastructure and built environment is moving to the severe end of the scale compared to where it is currently. And so I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, that when we're building, we're seeing that so many buildings, so many houses are going to become at massive risk due to coastal flooding and due to fire, due to all these different things we keep speaking about. I think we need to think about how we can prepare and renovate, and how we can try and support current infrastructure to be better, but also we are needing to continue to build. We're in a high housing shortage, and we see things like this as a need for new houses. Let's look at how these are built better in the first place, so we're not just continuing to exacerbate this problem, and so that we're not increasing that disaster bill at the end of every fire, every flood that we're going to be seeing on such an ongoing basis. I think the other piece, there's so many areas, but I won't take up all the time. But the other thing that I would point out around circular economy's opportunity is the regeneration piece. Regenerating natural systems is the third of the three key principles of circular economy, and irrespective of this report, I think it's the third principle that doesn't get enough attention. We're looking at climate, we're seeing 40 to 70%. So they said on average, half of native plants will need to basically adapt or die because they're going to see climatic conditions that they're not used to. There is the opportunity for us to try and support these ecosystems, because by supporting ecosystems, we're supporting the climate, we're supporting people. We can't pretend that we're separate from it. So yes is the answer. I do think there's the opportunity for circular. I think just in general, the mindset of looking at everything as systems is a massive opportunity and could prompt some really positive dialogue in this space.
You've gone on mute suddenly. That's all right. I'm wondering, the final area I'd like to touch on quickly is the relationship between innovation and policy, because I think the only thing we know is that we don't have solutions to all of these issues at the moment. And as new innovations come up, they will inform better policy to fast track adaptation. Do we have good enough interface between innovators and policy making at the moment? Maybe Emma or Jason would like to jump on that one.
I'm probably a bit negative about this. No, is the answer, and I think that there are a lot of good people out there that are doing some really interesting work and thinking about this a lot. And often they're people that have been around for quite a while, so they've got the benefit of, looking back over time and seeing, what has worked and what doesn't work. And we're sort of I feel that we're in a interesting period of time in terms of, research, development, innovation. We've had lots of systems in terms of government funding, funded jointly with industry, sometimes CRCs, and in the agriculture sector, RDCs. We've got the third review coming out shortly. And, that's you're going to be quite, I think it already is a bit controversial. And they're focusing on, challenges. And I think that that's really good. And obviously this is one of the major challenges that we're facing at the moment in terms of climate and climate adaptation. So I think change is coming in terms of that interface, that innovation policy interface, but it's just an ongoing issue with our short political cycles and our federation system that sort of holds things back, often the same old discussion that we have in Australia, and the different states and the federal government and all, how they work together. So it's complex, but it's ongoing. And really, what I'm excited about is working with younger people too, that because they are our future. So it's important to have their voice in the development of policy, and I'm not sure if that's the case at the moment. Sometimes it gets taken over by sort of loud voices, and whether that's sort of big companies or just people that are really good at lobbying, and bureaucrats or politicians or what have you. But I think we need better ways to engage the community in the development of policy. So I'll be watching that one closely, as always. And it's really disconcerting that Piers is frozen with his eyes closed here.
See if I can turn myself off. I'm not sure if you guys can even hear me at this stage. I do apologize. You can hear me. I am not asleep. I feel like that cat face in the court drama where insisting it's not a cat. I am well awake. What I might do, because I think my internet connection is dodgy, I might ask Katie to handle some of the questions from the Q&A rather than depend on me. Would that be okay, Katie?
Yeah, sure. Happy to jump in. I'm cautious. We actually only have the 5 minutes left. Anyway, so perhaps the three of us could almost key main takeaway or key takeaway first, and then if there's any time, I know we've got a couple of questions and some great discussions in the chat. So thank you everyone for sharing your ideas in there, and your also what you're working on too. That's great. And Colin, I see you're talking about your PhD, which will be published soon. So we'd love for them to be shared with this list once that's done. So yeah, I'll go to you first, Emma, but do you have any final takeaways or what you'd like to see happen as a result of this?
I'd like to I guess for it not to be sort of forgotten about, because there are just so many reports and government reports, consultants reports, and all of that sort of stuff. I just think it's a really important piece of work, and it's not static as well. So yeah, let's just not forget about this, and get on with our lives. I think that's my main point.
Piers, I can pass back to you now. It looks like you're awake, so ready for the last 5 minutes.
Well, to some degree, we'll see. We'll see how we go. Jason, where do you think this kind of report and assessment leaves Australia? I love the way I'm now frozen, holding my nose. It's great.
I hope that it can be something for multiple organizations in the same space, for example, in a place, in a city, in a region, to come around and discuss, well, what does this say about what's important to us and what we should be doing together? How should we be coordinating, collaborating to manage these risks and or find the opportunity for us so that we come out of this in the best shape possible. So, and then I think the other thing is, what do we need to be doing at national level to support that place-based efforts around managing the impacts of climate change? I don't know if you can.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
I'll now throw your own question back to you, Katie. Where do you... Sorry.
I thought you might pass it back to me, so that's why it was quite an easy question to finish up. So, I definitely agree with both of what Emma and Jason said about wanting this to not be a static document, that this does stay in circulation, not just a big shock factor and then it disappears with the news cycle. And also, yeah, Jason, your points around making sure that place-based approach. I know that there's certain policy or some other funding decisions, such as continuing to subsidize coal and gas, does not necessarily align with some of the messaging in this, but I hope that by having this document in itself positions Australia to be a part of conversations globally with other companies, that have already gone down this path, already have their own national climate risk assessment. I would like to think that this would mean that we are starting some conversations there. And also where possible, sharing with international partners and where we can learn from others as well. So, Canada, for example, there's plenty of regions there that always struggle with wildfires. I know that's a significant risk for them. How can we share ideas, share learning, share even projections in that sort of field, looking to New Zealand and Australia with similarities in coastal regions. The US is quite a different space politically and environmentally, but it is a big country with many different landscapes which would hold similar characteristics to Australia. So I think trying to get the balance between, doing everything ourselves because no one is able to support Australia's adaptation more than Australia, but also seeing how we can accelerate the conversations and the progress by looking at how others are doing it too.
Thank you all very much for your time and your thoughts. I think this is going to be a fast moving conversation, and I think the innovation is perhaps an area that can keep this conversation moving and interesting and engaging. So it's great to hear from you three on those sorts of opportunities. And thank you to our audience for coming along. Taylor, do you want to talk about any upcoming events, or is anything housekeeping from anyone?
No housekeeping from our end, other than we'll send a recording of this webinar out early next week, and we'll also send details on the upcoming webinar with the opportunity to RSVP next week in that same email. So stay tuned for more updates, everyone.
Thank you all for coming along, and thank you for bearing with my horrible internet. I'm now going to throw my computer in the bin. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend, and hope to see you at the next events. Thanks, guys.